Something we don't talk about very much here is the way that the design of a film's world impacts its story. Horror movies usually take place in a heightened reality because, unlike say some boring Oscar bait historical drama, horror can be out there and weird and stylized in ways that more respectable films can't, because it adds to the atmosphere and effect. And one of the best cases of horrific design comes from David Fincher's Se7en. If you were to describe this film, it would sound more like a police procedural than a horror movie. But what makes Se7en so great and so horrific is the design of its world. This is a film about sin and moral corruption, so the city is drenched in perpetual rain, evoking the dirt and violence that surrounds the characters at all times. Even in their own homes, you can still hear the rain outside. Detective Mills and his wife Tracy have recently moved to the city because he feels he can do some good there, but when they invite his partner Somerset over for dinner, their whole apartment begins to rattle and shake as a train passes by. And while this is played as a rare moment of levity in the film, it also serves as a reminder that the city and all of its oppressive gloom is still out there, shaking their home as it will come to shake their family out of their complacency and into a world of darkness. And darkness is one of the defining characteristics of Se7en's design. They even used a method called a bleach bypass to treat the film stock itself, which creates deeper blacks. The dreary weather outside is matched by the shadows of the crime scenes, where Mills and Somerset's torches cut through the dark, reflecting their roles as bringers of hope and light. But see how little light they are able to cast here? Somerset tries the light switch, but it doesn't work. At the first crime scene, our villain John Doe leaves a note that reads,
"Long is the way and hard that out of hell leads up to light."
It's from Milton. Paradise Lost.
Those series of murders are meant as a statement against the corrupted heart of this city, pointing out how the tolerance for the 7 deadly sins makes this nameless place into the urban hell of filth and rain and the gloom that we're presented with. Of course, what he doesn't realise is that his crusade of violence is making the world much darker. It's no coincidence that Doe's crime scenes are by far the darkest locations in the film. The inescapable rain and bleakness of the city created a monster who, in trying to bring light, only brings more darkness. Once the detectives find Doe's base of operations, Mills's torch starts to flicker and cut out, and as the film goes on, it becomes more and more clear that the police are losing this battle with the dark, which is punctuated and enhanced by sparing splashes of red. Much of the film's more disgusting content shares this motif of colour. The tomato sauce in the first victim's murder, the bed sores of the third victim, and the neon cross and darkroom lights in Doe's apartment. These details all stand out in our minds because they contrast so violently with the film's otherwise muted colour palette, enhancing our sense of disgust and trepidation. Fincher is careful to show us just enough of these details to make us truly horrified, but he shies away from full-on splatter gore.
There's a psychological trauma that the movie is inflicting on you because it's making you think about things that you don't want to think about.
And each of these little hints of colour highlights the thematic importance of the scenes and how the ideas of deadly sins and religious belief can be distorted to a disgusting and painful extreme. The tomato sauce represents gluttony, the bed sores sloth, and the red light of Doe's apartment reflects his twisted devotion to Christianity, but also clearly connotes hell and the suffering he believes people should endure for their sins. Of course, the most obvious source of red in a film this violent is blood, most strikingly when Doe waltzes into the police precinct caught literally red-handed and drenched in blood. Not only is this a striking image, particularly once we discover whose blood that is, it further highlights how jaded and accepting of horror the people in this city have become. Nobody even notices this man in a police station until he screams for attention.
Detective! You're looking for me.
Doe's crimes are meant as a statement, a sledgehammer as he puts it, to shock people out of their complacency and apathy in a world dominated by darkness. But so what? Plenty of horror films use darkness and colour very effectively. What makes this different from the careful and purposeful design of, say, The Babadook? Well, I'm glad you rhetorically asked. What makes the design of this film truly special is that it ties directly into the narrative, because Se7en takes people and turns them into elements of design. We don't see most of the victims until they're already dead. Each of those crimes is set up very performatively with symbols and images that stick in your head, effectively turning people into objects of spectacle, into part of the film's design. The most heightened and intense scenes in Se7en are those that take place in the murky crime scenes, with gluttony and sloth in particular looking almost unrecognisably human. Death turns us all from people into objects, and many of the victims aren't named or given much backstory, so we really only experience them sensually as set dressing. They're dehumanized to the point of being objects of our fascination and repulsion. The lust victim isn't shown at all, just the method by which she was killed, because in this nameless city, these nameless characters are reduced into things, into horrific ideas in our heads, and this becomes even more impactful when we actually see it happening. Watching this film for the first time, I remember wondering where it could possibly go from here. How could it become any more horrific? After a while, just showing us something nasty isn't going to feel like an escalation so much as repetition. So what do the filmmakers do? They take a character we have personal stakes in and make her into the last victim. We don't see Tracy's head, just a box and a smear of blood, but that's enough. She is reduced into a symbol, one that places an image of decapitation in our minds but doesn't show it to us. The film is similarly withholding about its villain. The famous title sequence is entirely made up of details. It hints at the world and the character of John Doe, but we don't actually see him until the end. Instead, he is implied by the world. He is kept mysterious, felt as a presence throughout the whole film in the acts of thematically resonant violence he leaves behind, but that's all he is. John Doe is an enigma. He's a series of unhinged acts, clues and objects, but not a person, hence the name John Doe. Even when the police find him, we only see him as a shadowy silhouette because John Doe isn't a character so much as an influence. He's the touches of red, he's the dehumanization of people, he's the manifestation of the literal and metaphorical darkness of this world. The design of Se7en, every element of the film leads back to him. Every color and location and corpse is John Doe, and John Doe is nobody. Nothing but the design of the film. In the end, we're taken out of the city into the bright heat of the desert, but it doesn't feel like an escape from the darkness. Rather, the metaphorical darkness has so thoroughly enveloped us that even literal light seems oppressive. The atmosphere, the anticipation, and the horrifying outcome all go back to the design, to turning characters into objects and abstract ideas. Doe tells Mill to become wrath, as he has become envy, as the other victims have become nothing more than symbols of the depravity of this world. The darkness is triumphant, and Mills is swallowed up by the city. Film is an inherently collaborative medium, and we do a disservice to the many talented people who work on them to only credit the director for their power. I think it's safe to say that David Fincher is a genius, but without the production designer, art director, set decorator, and costume designer among many others, this film wouldn't exist, and certainly wouldn't be as brilliant as it is, because in the end, Se7en really is a film defined by its design.
I love those scenes where people kind of exist in this world that you're positing, so the world isn't just there to kind of, fuel the narrative. It's also about how people exist in a place, and that's so much of what the Somerset character is talking about. It's like that's his conundrum, that's what he's at war with, is the place that he lives.